Welcome. I'm Frank Conkling with Panda Consulting, and this is Panda Consulting's ArcGIS workshop. Today, we're going to go and look at the Traverse tool, look and explore both things that are obvious and things that are not so obvious, and see if that can help you to go and get everything you can out of that tool. Again, I'm Frank Conkling. If you're in attendance right now and you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat window. Chris, who's going to moderate it, will go and share those with me. So before we start, there's a couple things I wanted to talk about. First was that we now have a YouTube channel that contains all of the prior recordings since we first started this in March of last year. So on these, you can actually go and look through them and search and subscribe and do all of that. So you don't necessarily have to go and download the recordings anymore. They're all going to be up and available for you anytime you want. So please go ahead and look at those. And if you'd like, go ahead and subscribe to them. And hopefully you can enjoy them and it's easier for you to go and look at. So let's go ahead and look at the Traverse tool and see what it actually does. On here, I've got the Traverse tool. And by the way, this is ArcGIS Pro 2.8, not just 2.8, but if we actually look at this this is actually 2.8.2. They just came out with an update this morning on it. So just be aware, if you go in here and you have automatic updates, you're probably going to get a new update on here. So this is 2.8 here. The data set I'm working on happens to be an ArcGIS parcel fabric. That's not relevant. These things that I'm going to be talking about, they're available either on regular ArcGIS Pro using simple features with topology, or the parcel fabric. These things work on all of them. I did want to go and mention something for those of us that are parcel mappers inside of public land survey system states, that inside the ArcGIS Pro, if we look at the options, the distance units, by default, the only distance units that are stored with you, that come with it out of the box, are foot, foot US, and yard. But notice there's no chain on here. There's no rods, perches, anything that in some states, there's a lot of references to those. So one of the things I want to go and make sure you're aware of is that in order to go and utilize those additional options, especially things like inside of a Traverse tool, what you do is under the distance units, click on the select unit, and you can actually go and add the actual chains. And you can add any of the different types of chains. In this case, I'm just going to put chain on here. I'm also might go down here and do rods if I often come across rods, and put those on here. And notice it will go and add them as part of the options that are available, part of the options that it uses. But if you look at this, for example, the chain itself, it says that there's an equivalency between a chain and a meter. Everything gets analyzed as far as its equivalency to meters. So just be aware of it, that if it looks up here, it looks a little strange. It's just because it's making it equivalent to meters when it stores it. All right. So let's look about some of the options that are in here. The first, and this is pretty obvious, when you go and start a Traverse, it asks you for what layer are you actually working on. And by default, it allows you to go and work on those layers which are editable and visible at the moment. If I go and turn off my tax layer group here, and I pull this down, the only thing I can work on are that layer that is editable and being displayed. Same way as if I turn on my conveyance division, I then have those also available to me. But so one of the things you want to do is to make it easier, you can just go in and reference and say, I only want to go and work on certain things. The other thing you'll notice is that one of the changes that occurred in the last two versions is that it allows you to go and not just create lines with the traverse tool, but you're also allowed to go and create polygons with this. And this is one I actually fought for a lot because we have a lot of our clients that aren't necessarily parcel mappers that have to go and create a polygon that's the result of some sort of meets and bounds description. They really don't care about, keeping a track of the actual dimensions that were used. They just need to go and build that. So just to illustrate real quickly, I can click on tax parcels and I can go here and I can begin to go and edit and build out whatever type of parcel I want to go and build and start inputting my COGO values as part of the inputs for the traverse. So in this case, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to use a quadrant reference to determine the bearings on here. In this case, I'm going to say 0 degrees and a dash with a 1. The quadrant is number 1, which is the northeast quadrant. Number 2 is southeast. Number 3 is southwest, and number 4 is northwest. So I can very quickly go and input the bearing on here just by using that sort of a reference. In this case, now I'm just going to say 250 feet. It's good to go and start building my polygon. And I can now put 90 degrees due east on here for 250 feet. I can then put 0 degrees south for 250 feet. And I can put 90 degrees due west for 250 degrees. And notice even with a polygon, if I come back and close upon my beginning point, it gives me the misclosure distance, misclosure ratio, and the overall area that's inside of that polygon. And when I hit finish, it will create that new polygon for me. So again, you can put not just lines with the traverse tool, but you also can go and input polygons with this. And again, those of us that are parcel mappers might not find this as handy, but it is something that's extremely handy when you're going and building things like city boundaries and zoning boundaries and things like that that might be defined by a legal description, by meets and bounds legal description on there. All right, so let's go and take that again and just delete that out of here. All right, let's move back now and go to tax lines. Pretty obvious here. We can go and do a start anywhere here. And I'm going to use the same sort of configuration. I'm going to go north, 0 degrees. I'm going to go 250 feet. And I will go and input that first line on here. Then I'm going to go north, east, 90 degrees, 250 feet. I'm going to go south, 250 feet. And I'm going to go west 250 feet and close out on this. So again, these are some pretty obvious things, but if you're not used to working with this, there's some elements in here that you want to be aware of. First is this options. This options allows us to go and set, well, how close do I have to be for it automatically to go and close on that same point? That's the closure tolerance, the closure tolerance. And by default, it's set to 1 foot. I can put it to anything I want. If I'm working in a rural area where I might be working with some older legal descriptions, I may put that up to 5 feet. It, again, depends upon what sort of tolerance there is in that area. If I'm working in a more urbanized area, I might want to cut it down to maybe even less than a foot. But I can go and set that as my option anytime I want on here. The other thing that's over here under these options is there's the ability to go in and export a traverse file, in which you will take these values on here and export them out to a text file. So let's go and actually do that and show you what it looks like. If I go and export this, it will ask me, where am I going to export it out? I'm going to put it into this CAD demo area, and I'll just call this demo, and it will have a .txt suffix on the end of it. I go ahead and write that out. Let's go and look and see what this actually looks like now. If we go here, yeah, let's go in here and do it. Where did I put this? Into the folder, project folders, CAD demo. CAD demo. And this was called demo.txt. And I can open this with Notepad and actually look at what this is. Now, those of us that have been working with the traverse file inside of ArcMap recognize this structure. This first line inside of this file is the direction type. In this case, this is QB or quadrant bearings, so it defines what type of directions are being stored on here. The next one is the direction units. In this case, this is degrees, minutes, and seconds, which is storing. The next line has SP, which is the starting point. It provides the coordinate values for the starting point in the projected coordinate system. In this case, here's the 2 coordinate values for the starting point of this. Then it moves down into and tells us what type of courses are available here. In this case, this is a direction and distance course. It had a bearing of north 00 east and a distance of 250. Next one had northeast 250, then southwest 250, then, excuse me, southwest of 0 of 250, then southwest of 90, 250. So it actually mimics exactly what was put in here. Notice what it does not have. It does not have what type of line was put on there, or whether or not it was a line or a polygon that was being built. This is purely for the course information, the individual lines. How is the directions shown on them, and then what's the starting coordinate values for them. So this is a fairly simple structure for it. What that means is if I go and delete this and say, let's take these lines and delete them, I can go back to my traverse and say, let's go and import this traverse file. Let's go here and let me go back here and refresh this. And import. This is so strange. It's just done this to me before. It's right there, isn't it? Let me go back here. workshops. Entering is not showing me this one. Interesting. I'm going to have to find out why that's not doing it, why it's not allowing me to go and look at that on here. One more time here, deep dives, CAD demo here. There it is there. All right, I'll look into that further, why it won't let me go and do this. Should show right here, because that is my folder. All right, let's look in and continue along the options a little bit more. There's a new option inside of 2.8, and that it automatically, if we have something that's not closing, it will automatically allow it to force the closure on here. So if I go and build something here, and again, and then 90 east, 250, 0 south, 250, 90 west, 248, and that's still a foot. Let's make it 248. So it does not close. I can go up here, excuse me. It still doesn't close. I can go in here and say force this to close, and it will tell me what my closure error is on here and allow me to go and build that closed traverse on here. That is nice. That is nice. It allows me to go and get some more information on here. But that doesn't tell me enough about why doesn't it close? What's missing on here? And this is one of the really nice improvements that they've made in 2.8 is they now have a closure option here. If I've set this, and it gives me a closure option with multiple closure types, in which I can say just snap my lines to the closure. When I say snap to the lines here, it will go and not just give me my original input values, but also give me adjusted values and tell me what these residuals are. How much did it change each of the lines on here? And in this case, because I was missing something on that last line, it told me that there were no changes on any of the bearings, any of the directions, nor in any of the lines, except for that last one, in which it went and added 2 feet for it to automatically have it close. The other options here, the compass rule is actually, it will go and make adjustments to it that deal with the bearings on here. And you can see that this now has a 6-minute adjustment on it to make it close. The traverse allows it to go and make some adjustments regarding the distances on here. And Crandall is a combination of the two on here. So that allows me to go and look at this. As of yet, we still don't have any way to go and export out and save these adjustment values on here. We are working with Esri to try to figure out what's the best way to do this. But those of us that are involved in parcel mapping, this is important to figure out if it didn't close, how much did it close by, and whether or not there was an adjustment on here and how much it was adjusted. All right. So that's a standard adjustment here. So I can say adjust it. It will go and adjust it in. The question most people have is that, what about this adjustment? Is it actually impacting any of the values which are stored? And when we can see right here that it does not change the values that are input in here. It does not change them at all. It still retains those original dimensions that were stored on here, and it keeps it there. All right. So, Chris, do we have any questions yet?
Nancy has a question.
Okay.
Is the Traverse tool for features not in the parcel fabric?
Yes, Nancy. The Traverse feature works for any. The Traverse tool works with any feature, any line or polygon feature inside of ArcGIS Pro. You don't have to have the parcel fabric. I'm trying to remember, there is a limitation regarding the shape files, if I remember correctly, but and that it may not store everything correctly in a shape file, but on all normal type of feature classes inside of ArcGIS Pro, it works with anything. I was actually demonstrating this before, where I go in here to a traverse and I can create a new traverse. By the way, this is the way that you create a new one. Is I click down on new, and I'm going to go and change to the tax polygons and input new values in here. Say 250, and then I can go and do 90 degrees, do east for 250. I can do 0 degrees, do south for 250, and then I can do 90 degrees, do west for 250. It will still give me a closure, even though I am doing that polygon, and it will build a polygon, not lines. So it doesn't have to be a parcel fabric. It could be anything.
Frank, we have another question in the chat.
Yes, sir.
Jamie asks, can you show how curves work? They said in ArcMap, there's a right or left for curves.
Yes.
Does that work in Pro?
I am going to do that. Definitely. Yes. That will be included in here. We're going to go and talk about that. Talks about curves, because curves seem to give problems to a lot of people. And I'm going to show you some hints on those. All right. So just a little patience there. All right. So let me go and show you a couple more tricks, a couple things that may not be obvious when you first start using it. For example, I've gone and input what would traditionally be called a meets and bounds parcel, where my point of beginning is identified early on. So I can easily identify that. But what happens if I have a point of commencement and then a series of courses that go to a point of beginning, and then I move forward? This is one of the things that often you'll have to deal with. So it turns out that there's some little tricks in here. So I can go and say, I'm going to do tax lines, and I'm going to start here. But, and this is the trick, when I start, rather than going and inputting tax lines, I can actually pull this down and say, no, I'm going to start with a connection line. And I can say that 45 degrees northeast for 300 feet is here. And it goes, and if you're looking, you can actually see this is symbology of a connection line, not a tax line. And then I can go and continue with all these courses. All right. And say, okay, it's here for 500 feet until I get to my point of beginning. At the point at which I start my point of beginning and it identifies it in there, what I can do is I can pull this down and switch now to real parcel boundary lines, tax lines on here. So now I can either continue with this same bearing by hitting enter and then do 250 on here. And if you'll note, the type of line has changed. Previously, we thought that you'd have to go and do a new and then start it again and identify that. No, you just have to change this template here that you're using on here. And now let me go down south for 250. Let me go west for 250. And let me go north for 250. And it gives me the closure of these. So it connects back up to that point on here for this. All right, so I don't necessarily have to interrupt using a traverse to go and change between different types of lines. Now, this can get confusing because you want to make sure, for example, that you're using either a connection line or an individual type of parcel type line if you're inside the parcel fabric. If you're going and working on a line-based data model where those lines are being identified as either, oh, this is a line along a right-of-way, this is a section line, this is whatever, you can quickly just switch between those various line types and continue with your traverse on here. So just to let you know, there is an easy way to change the type of line you're creating within that traverse and have it go and close on here. And again, it will go and give you this together with everything else in here. Noticing something different here, though, is that the reported acreage in here is 115,000. That doesn't seem right. If I go and create a new traverse here, and again, I use these same values, 250, and then I go 90 east for 250, 90 south or 0 south for 250, and then I go 90 west for 250. Look at what my calculated area is. My calculated area is really only about 62,000 square feet. But when I included additional lines in here, it was calculating, or it was miscalculating the acreage on there. So just be aware of that yes, you can use this trick to go and not have to start and stop the lines on here, but the area that's included inside of those lines, the area that it calculates, is not going to give you a correct area calculation on it. And again, these are lines. My thought in having taught how to go and calculate area is it's using a methodology called double meridian distance between here, and it's actually calculating the area from here all the way back to the closing. So it's including these two lines inside the area calculations, which is not necessarily what you should be doing. But that's, as long as you're aware of that, that's not a bad thing to do. Matter of fact, those of us that do meets and bounds description a lot, that you've got a point of commencement, that's a really quick way to go in and put all those lines in, and then eventually go and build your area on here. Zach, I just saw that, Christopher, because I just saw something pop up in the chat window. Zach just asked me, does that incorrect area end up as an attribute in the polygon? I haven't built a polygon here. All I've done is I've gone and built lines on here. So I would assume it would not. I can actually go and do that though, which is going to bring me to a couple more tricks in here. I'm going to take care of these other lines here. All right, and I'm going to select this. I'm going to select this. Let's get off of here. I'm going to select this also, and I'm going to unselect my polygons here. So I have these two previous ones in. I'll delete them out. So Zach, I will get to that. I promise I will get to this. So let me show you another neat little trick on here. All right. The way the traverse tool is set up to work is that it primarily is for the creation of those lines. But what happens when you have existing lines that you want to capture? How can you do that? Well, it turns out that you've got this thing called trace lines in here. And what trace lines allows you to do is literally just trace the lines, and it captures the COGO values that are stored on those, nope, not that way. I want to go. Let me make sure I'm clicking on the right one here. Go back here, cancel out of there. Let's go to trace line again. And I wonder if it's only tracing these things for me. Yep, it did only trace these. Now let's go and if you'll note, it actually went and traced and captured those values in here when it went and did that. So traced line allows you to go and take an existing set of lines, trace those, and capture the COGO values that are stored on them if you wish to go and recreate a traverse for you. So let me go back here now and look at and answer Zach's question. I'm going to create a record here. For those of you that are not familiar with the parcel fabric, a record is a coordinating feature, and that it's an organizing feature, sorry, in which it allows me to go and take certain elements. In this case, I'm going to take these lines in here. If I look at my attributes, I have 2 connection lines. I have 4 of these, and I'm going to go and assign them those lines to this record. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and take and tell the parcel fabric to go and analyze the lines in here. And by the way, let me go and show you something here. I can go in and basically remove anything that's not part of these lines, not part of this record, and tell it to go and hide everything else from me. Well, I go and create a seed. Now, what a seed is doing is it's actually analyzing the lines that are associated with this record, and it's analyzing only those lines. And it will create a seed for me, and then go and I can say, build the polygon from the lines that are part of this record and the seed that's part of this record. All right, and it goes and builds it. And right now, my area is shown as an acre. Let me go and change this so that we can see it as square feet again. I need to go back to my edits and actually save that edit and then go back here. All right, so on here I have my area, shape area here. Shape area, sorry. Not stated area, it's the shape area. And I right now was taking the square footage and dividing the square footage by 43,560 to go and show me what the shape area in acreage was. I'm going to set it back to just number and tell me in 2 decimal places and show me what square footage is instead. All right, and let's go ahead and save this on here. Field, save this. Now, when I go in here and look at this again, it now gives me 62,499.75. So even though Zach it had lines in here. And even though the traverse tool calculated that it probably would be 115,000, it actually calculated the polygon and stored on it the actual square footage only included in those boundary lines on there. Is that a good enough explanation, or do we need to break that down even more? All right, so again, one of the tricks is that when you're going in and creating something with the traverse, when you're creating lines with the traverse, you can integrate multiple types of lines. It doesn't have to be just one type of line. It can be multiple types of lines in there. And it will give you a closure, but just be aware if you're doing multiple types of lines, it might not give you actually the acreage on here. But this does bring up another interesting point here, and that with the traverse tool, another little trick is I'm going to go in here and do tax lines here. What happens? Let's clear this out. Let's set my start here. All right. Let's go and do due north again for 250 feet. All right. Let's look at another little trick inside of the traverse tool. I can do automatic deflections on here so that if I want to go and do 90 degrees from my current bearing, 90 degrees to the east, I can just input 90 in there. Go and put 90 degrees in here and do, and make sure that 90 degrees in here and 250. All right. And then I can do again plus 90 degrees. So I want to go 90 degrees to the right, 250 again. And then again, 90 degrees. So I can do deflections in here as input inside of my value. So I can put bearings in here. I can put deflections in here also for this. One more trick before we're done here and start looking at curves. I can now go and do this, and I can mix and match certain elements. So let's go due north again for 250 feet. Then let's go plus 90 degrees for 500 feet. All right. Then let's go due south for 100 feet. All right, 100 feet here. And then we come across an area that is a natural area. So there's a meander line in here. Using that trick of integrating other types of lines, I can put a meander line in here and say, okay, now, by the way, that should be 0 degrees. For that. All right. This should then be 0 degrees. Southwest. I can now tell it to change and put a meander line inside of here rather than just a full boundary line in here for 150 feet. Then I can also tell it to go 90 degrees here, and for 100 feet, put again a connection line or meander line in here. And then I could tell it to go ahead and flip back to the tax parcel line. So I have a boundary line here, and I'm now going due west, and I can go 150 feet back here. And sorry, I miscalculated on there. 500, sorry. That would have been 350. Nope. Boy, I can't even do the math in my head now. There we go. We go back to the full boundaries. So in here, we have our boundary lines input into here up to our meanders. And then I have meander lines in here that connect back to where I'm not on a boundary or meander of navigable water, but I'm back on the boundary line. So I can then switch back and do that. This actually, again, will calc an area. Just be careful. In this case, because this is not an origin connection, just part of the boundary, it will calculate the area up and include it inside of these boundary lines and the connection lines. So it will calc the area along the meander line for me. And that area I've found has been valid. So it's not, you can use this and this trick in here inside the Traverse tool to go and build things, not just boundary lines, but also you can build meander lines in here. All right. New one more. Again, I promise we're going to get to curves, Jamie. All right. So what happens if I'm in here and I'm inputting this value? All right, and I go 90 degrees. And then I come up against something for 250 where it just says thence southerly and westerly along the right of way of this property. All right. So if they have inside of here some meandered area, I have on here on my tool palette, I have COGO lines, and then I have regular line features, which are multi-point lines, and I can tell it to go ahead along the boundary until I get back. I'm sorry. On there until I get to there, and then I can go back to COGO lines and tell it 90 degrees due west. And I don't know what this is going to wind up being. I could measure that. I can turn on my dynamic and tell me this is supposed to be 90 degrees, about 160 feet. Okay, let's turn that off. 160 feet. Tell it to go and force my closure on here. All right. And set my closing distance to there. And tell it to go ahead and use this last one to close and adjust this out. And so it will allow me to go and do that. Actually, what I want to do is also show one more thing here. All right, so if I have this here, I can go and click here to here. And what this does is this will go and it will capture the digitized bearing and distance of the line. You'll note here on this this polyline, it has a bearing on it, but that bearing is included in angle brackets. Angle brackets mean that, in fact, it is a digitized line. Same way here with the distance, it means that this is a digitized line. If you wish to retain those values, you can select it and hit enter, and it will remove the actual brackets around them. So here I can say, okay, remove the brackets from here and remove the brackets from here for me on here. So when you digitize a line, it captures that digitized bearing and distance, but puts brackets around it. And the way to remove the brackets is to go and click into that cell, highlight it and hit enter, and it will remove the brackets for you. So again, to demonstrate quickly, I can click here and I can say here, 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 and here. And they all have brackets on them. If I wish to remove them and store those COGO values on the lines, I can select and highlight each of those cells and click there so that it actually goes and converts those into real numbers. And once it has that, it will calculate not just whether or not it closes, but what the area included inside of there is. Another little trick. You can digitize the line over and then tell it, no, convert that into a real value, not just digitized values. Curves. Jamie, let's look at curves. All right. Let's go over here and start another line here. All right. And we're going to use our famous 250 for the initial line. I now have a curve on here. And what I wish to do is I wish to go and tell it to go in and input a curve. So there's several ways in which I can do that. One, I have to tell it the direction, the orientation of this curve. Is this curve tangent to this line, meaning the radius point is 90 degrees off of this line? So that in order to go and tell it that, what I need to do is tell it where my tangent or where my radius point is. So it's 90 degrees due east is my radial bearing, RB. Then say 0 here and a radius of 100 feet. And I can tell it that my central angle is 90 degrees here. And it will give me, there is my radial bearing. There's my radius distance. There's my central angle or delta angle on here. Jamie, you had a question regarding right and left. And note in here that the traverse tool and the way it stores curves is different from the arc map parcel fabric, but it's more similar to the arc map simple features in that there is no real radial lines that are being stored, nor is there a radius point. But if I go in here and I change this from a positive radius, which means that the radius point is on the right side of my line, to a negative radius, it will mean that my radius point has changed from here over to here, and you will see this curve change. Oh, it curved backwards on here. So because of what I was doing in there, but it will allow me to go and change that from a positive radius to a negative radius on here. Let's go out of here. Let's undo that. Let's undo that. Let's go to here. And now let's sort of look at another way we can do this. We can use a radial bearing. We can use a chord bearing. In this case, if this was a chord bearing, I could put the chord bearing in there and put CB for chord bearing. All right, tell it 100-foot radius, and then tell it also a degree, minutes, and seconds of 90 degrees. All right, and that will put it in there again. See if this does the same thing here. No, it changed it the other way. It's on the other side of it. I think because of this here. That's one of the options in here. Let's go back here, get rid of that. I can also tell it that I have the tangent bearing, the radius bearing, or the chord bearing on here, or I can use a shortcut and use the split, what I commonly call the splat or the asterisk, which is above the 8 key, and say, this is going to be tangent to here. And again, I'm going to go here. In this case, I'm going to change it to a -100. And I'm going to do 90 degrees on here. So it's going to go 90 degrees. It's changing my radius point from here to the other side of the line on here. And note what happens is that it automatically goes and calculates the bearing coming out of this line. So if I were tangent to the curve, I can hit this and then do 250 feet. It will then go 250 feet there. So here's a tip. When you are doing a subdivision, the most accurate way to go and input a traverse inside of a subdivision is to go and utilize the chord bearing if it's provided. If not, use a tangent bearing, because most curves inside of a subdivision plat are going to be tangent, or it's going to tell you what the chord bearing is. So use the tangent reference, and instead of using arc lengths or chord lengths on there, go and put the central angle in there. Central angle is the most accurate that you've got. So let's go and put another curve in here. I'm going to make it tangent here. I'm going to put 0 for my distance. And then I'm going to tell it that I want to be 100 feet, and I want to go 90 degrees here. To put here, it then gives me a tangent bearing coming out of north, 0, 0. So when you are inputting the information for a curve in a subdivision, use this tangent coming out of the curve as a check to make sure that that curve is really what it's supposed to be. So it should tell you what the bearing of the line coming out is. And if it doesn't match this, stop and go back and see if you input that curve correctly. In this case, I can say, yeah, go ahead. That looks good. Just like that, that's 80 feet. All right. Let me show you another little anomaly that I've discovered on here. Up until this point, we've been talking about closure as it relates to a closed polygon, a closed figure, in which the traverse starts at one point, goes around through a series of courses, and then comes back and closes on the same point. But there's also something called an open traverse. And with an open traverse, what it means is it starts at one point and then closes on a different point of a known value. So in this case, I could take this polygon here, or excuse me, this feature, this series of lines, and I can tell it, no, instead of closing back here, it actually should be closing here on here. So when I look, it tells me I'm 190 feet off. And if I look at closure, I can tell it to snap or to go and apply some adjustments in here for it and tell it to go ahead and adjust it. Be very, very careful about this. If your open traverse, if your series of lines has curves in it, and you're doing an open traverse closure on it, when it moves these lines, it will break the curves. It will force them to not be valid at all. How do you fix that? Well, it turns out, and I'm going to go and take this curve out. All right, I'm going to take this curve out here. And I'm just going to do a mass break on here. Let me go and undo both of those now that I've seen what I've done. All right. So how do I fix this? One of the things that you can do is you can take and create just a straight line here between these two, replicating what would normally be the chord of that curve on here. And then once you've got that, you can use the select tool, and on top of it, right click and say edit the vertices. And when you edit the vertices, the new functionality allows you to go and change a couple things in here. I can go in here and right click on this and I can say, change this segment to a circular curve. And I can then go and change where it's supposed to go or what it's supposed to do on here. All right, and how I actually define that. So just be aware that in ArcMap Parcel Fabric, you could change a line to a curve and a curve to a line. Not so in the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric or with the Traverse tool in here. I'm going to go and change that out. Another option that you can do is you can take this and draw endpoint curves here to here. And when you go to put the radius in, type in R, and it will tell you what radius you can put in there, and it will go and put that in there. So there are ways to go in and modify these as you're going through on here. Chris, do we have any other questions on here?
Yes, Nancy has a question. So when one method is more accurate than another, did you get a different curve with an alternate method?
Unfortunately, when I'm doing this open traverse, it's still corrupting the quality of that curve. So right now it's a bug inside the adjustments for open traverses. Closed traverses work great, no problem. But when you're doing an open traverse, that's when it's problematic on here, what you're doing. So yeah, Nancy, it's just something you want to be aware of. Another thing, by the way, I could do, I can take these lines, and if I'm looking to go and build a curve in here that I know is tangent, I could also go in here and do a fillet, all right, with a fixed radius. In this case, it was 100 feet. I can go and click on this line, and tell it there's my new curve. And what the fillet will do is it will automatically trim them up so that they are tangent in there. So that's a third option. If you're going and doing an open traverse and you want to go back and you've adjusted it to fit correctly, that's a good way to go and solve that. Still have a couple of minutes, so let's go and show you a couple more tricks in here. Let's go back here to my traverse tool. Let's get rid of that. I go to my traverse tool, do tax lines in here, and I'm just going to go and quickly, for safety's sake here, all right. So often what will happen is you'll be building a subdivision, which will have multiple lines on here, and you wind up building the boundary of the outside, and you maybe divide them up, and then you have to go back and you want to make sure that these lines close and they connect up these points and they store the values that you have on here. So in this case, let's go and see what this value is. All right, so let's say this is actually here. And then this is, the plat says 350. All right. Instead of what I actually calculate this digitized at. In order to make sure that that line touches that, what I can do is I can say, take and set my closing point to be there, and then tell it to go ahead, and it doesn't matter which of these, I can tell it to go ahead and adjust this and to make sure that it actually closes on that point. To make sure that it closes on that point, because if it doesn't close, when you go to build that seed in the parcel fabric, it won't build. There'll be a little gap there, and the gap may be very, very small, but it will not close. So another option is to go in here and, again, starting point there, Maybe this is supposed to be that value here, and this is supposed to be 385 on here. And if I zoom in here, you'll note there might be a rounding error or something in there. I can tell it to go ahead and set my closing to that point there, and it will automatically go and move it to that point. All right. So we are at an hour length here. As you can tell, there's a lot of little tricks inside of the traverse. How you go and build them, what lines you build, whether you build polygons, how you do curves on here. Are there any questions on here to help with it that I haven't covered, or anything you want to cover on here before I cut this workshop off? By the way, just a reminder, if you stick around afterwards, I'll also answer more questions on here. But is there anything in here that anybody wants me to on here? Zach has a question. Can you set it so any traverse automatically closes within a specific tolerance? You can set this closure tolerance, let's say 10 feet. I don't know whether I'd really recommend that, but let's do a new line, set the starting point here. All right. And it's supposed to be here. And this is supposed to be 549. Let's go and set that to 540. So it doesn't close. All right. And just tell it, we'll just go ahead and close it there. Now, in that case, it was above that normal tolerance, but because of the way I set the closing point afterwards, it didn't automatically jump there. But to answer your question, yes, you can set that so it automatically closes. Let's do a new one here, and let's test this. All right, 0 to 50 plus 90, 250 plus 90, 250 plus 90, 241. All right, and it closed within 9 feet, gave me what my closure was, and gave me my square footage on there. So even though it was 9 foot, I can set that all the way out there. Again, I guess it doesn't do any real harm if you've got a larger disclosure on here. It'll just automatically snap it to that. The question is, and I think, Zach, this is where you're going, is that stored with this project? I don't know. I don't know whether it's stored there or whether it's just temporary with this one session. I haven't tested that before. All right. So if there's no more questions, let's go ahead and stop this this workshop, and I'll stick around and answer anything else that you might have. Thanks, everybody, for coming.